Good morning, Maddie. How are you? I am great. Thank you for asking. I don't know. I don't think lime green is my color. You know, I dress in the dark. We continue with stories from Expat Days by, what's this guy's name? Steve Rosse. Keeper of the Flame. I was sitting in the Fuzzy Muffin Bakery yesterday, enjoying a slice of Linzer torte and a cup of cappuccino, when this guy walked in dressed like he was on his way to a prayer meeting. I watched him go from table to table handing out brochures. Either someone selling satellite dishes, I thought, or someone wants to testify for Jesus. He arrived at my table and flashed a brochure. It had an illustration on the cover of a smiling couple, blonde but with Asian eyes, sailing a boat under a rainbow and into a Crayola-colored sunset. The boat had the word love written in florid script across its stern, and I knew it was not going to be satellite dishes. I wonder if religious cults still put rainbows on their brochures. The rainbow, I think, these days is more often recognized either as the symbol of the Hawaiian University of Hawaii football team, the Rainbow Warriors, or a symbol of gay pride. And I wonder if religious cults still use that symbol prominently on their brochures. "Good morning, sir," he said, in some kind of lispy Middle European accent. "My name is Yakob. Could I take a moment of your time to talk about the problems this country is facing?" I'm going to stop doing that. It works better on the page. So he has very sibilant S's, which is supposed to be evocative of a snake or a Middle European accent. I was just killing time, waiting for my wife to finish at the hairdresser, so I told him to sit down. He dropped his shoulder bag, which clanked and clunked when it hit the chair. He flipped the lid open, and I saw that the bag was full of cassette tapes of the type that are sold under an inspirational label at the music store. Cassettes. Do you remember putting a cassette on a pencil to rewind it and spinning it around? How many technologies have come and gone in our lifetime? The waitress came over and Yakob spoke to her in rapid and fluent Thai. The fact that he could speak the language wasn't as surprising as what he said. "Bring me the biggest breakfast on the menu and put it on this farang's bill." He obviously had assumed I was a tourist, and not a bad assumption in the Fuzzy Muffin. It does most of its trade with tourists who get homesick for leavened products after just a week of rice. He gave me a beatific smile and began wiping his silverware with a napkin. "I don't know how familiar you are with this country, sir," he said to me, "but underneath all the glitter of these hotels you see here, there is a pathetic lack of faith. The people are floundering. They're standing on the edge of a chasm, and nobody is showing them where their salvation lies." He finished polishing his fork and put an open pamphlet in front of me. "I work for the Church of Now," he said, running a nicely manicured finger along the top line of text on the inside of the pamphlet. "We run a commune in the north where lost or searching souls can come and find the peace in which God's love is revealed. Many people come to us, sir, drug addicts, prostitutes, even rich people. While he said this, his eyes were sizing me up, trying to decide which category I belonged in. I myself was once addicted to opium, he said. When I came to the commune, I weighed half of what I do now, and the whites of my eyes were brown from the drugs. I was fascinated by his sibilant S's, and it was bugging me that I couldn't place the accent. What do you do up there? You gather food and clothing for the ill tribes? Teach English to lepers? I was trying to prompt more of those snaky S's. Oh, no, sir, he said with a frown. We cater to the spiritual needs of the people. We deliver the word and prayer. We are a new kind of tour guide in this country. We show the way. The waitress brought over a plate loaded with eggs, potatoes, bacon, and thick slices of brown bread. I know this breakfast well. It's called the Gut Buster, number 3 on the fuzzy muffin menu and priced at 375 baht with VAT and service charge. Yakob sent the girl back for a pot of coffee and a large orange juice, and he tucked his napkin into his collar, protecting the gold cross on his tie clip from the stray bit of egg yolk. By the way, sir, he said as he picked up his shiny fork, we are funded completely through private donations. He dug into the food, and while he ate, he continued telling me about the silver thread of prophecy and the good work done by the Church of Now. I skimmed his brochure and sipped my cold cappuccino. Yakob wasn't as much of an anachronism on Phuket as you may imagine. Despite its reputation as a Gomorrah, Phuket is not without its spiritual side. It's not uncommon for the local monks to troop past my house, accepting their alms at the same time in the morning that the Bilan is calling the faithful to prayers at the mosque up the street. There was a Catholic church on Phuket before the turn of the century, and the Methodists and the Protestants built theirs not much later. We've got a Baha'i church and a Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall, and even though we don't have a synagogue yet, should a devout Jew die on the island, it wouldn't be hard to round up enough landsmen to say Kiddush for him. Missionaries have been here for ages. A lot of them are buried in the Christian cemetery behind the Morning Star School. They take their ministry, as well as toothpaste, soap, books, clothes, and whatever else they can scrounge up, to the inmates of the provincial penitentiary. And they run the closest thing Phuket has to an orphanage. There are Taoist temples and Confucian temples, a Gurdwara for the Sikhs, and a mandir for the Hindus. The bigger the hotel, the bigger the spirit house in front of it. And there's an ancestor shrine in the living room of almost every house on the island. Should the tourists ever stop coming and the bottom drop out of all of our picnic baskets, we'll have lots of places to pray. I admire faith. I do. And I am jealous of those who have it. I am. I'd love to be able to say without a shadow of a doubt, I know where I came from. I know why I'm here. And I know where I'll be going when I leave here. But I've never had it. And as I look over my shoulder at my passing middle age, My relationship with the universe has become pretty well set. I leave it alone, and it kicks the crap out of me every chance it gets. It may not be a fair system, but we're both used to it by now. Yakob droned on, his veins free of any artificial chemical, but doped to the gills on God, stuffing his face between pronouncements of impending doom and offers of salvation. I thought about faith. At a point when he stopped to take a breath and wipe his mouth, I excused myself to the men's room, dodging left at the espresso machine and sneaking out through the kitchen. Of course, I paid for my cake and my coffee on my way out, but I let Yakob pay for his own breakfast. One thing I do know about faith, it doesn't come cheap. Wow. You know what's really striking me about these stories, Maddie? I had not yet gone to graduate school. I had not yet been taught that you can't lie, you can't make shit up in creative nonfiction. I had a commitment to send 1,000 words a week to the newspaper, and that paid my rent. And sometimes you need an ending. Sometimes stories don't end conveniently in real life. And I thought, it's just a newspaper column, it's not journalism. I can stretch the truth a little. So this encounter, everything that he says to me in this story, the guy really said to me. I was sitting and eating at a place called the Tropicana Bungalows at the south end of Cotta Beach. It's not there anymore. But it's where I stayed early on when I came to Phuket. And this guy and his wife came and sat at my table without being invited. They just came and sat down while I was eating, and he ordered a big breakfast. She was hugely pregnant. This was one of the most beautiful human beings I've ever seen in my life. This girl was gorgeous. I would guess she was about 16 years old. She was at least 8 months pregnant. And she didn't say a word. She didn't look at me. She didn't acknowledge my existence. The whole time they sat there, she sat and stared off into space like she was drugged. And I hope she was not. But the line about addicted to opium and the whites of the eyes being brown, he said that in relation to his wife. He said, when she came to us, she was addicted to opium and the brown whites of her eyes were brown from the opium. I did not stiff them for the breakfast. I paid for the breakfast in the real encounter. And passive aggression being my aggression of choice, I went home and wrote a story that made him look bad. But I also bought one of his tapes and I kept it on my bookshelves for years. It was a cassette tape, very cheaply produced with a very crudely drawn illustration of a man and woman in a boat sailing under a rainbow with lots of crosses around and lots of mentions of Christ in the text. But yeah, that line, they suffer from a lack of faith. God, you can't throw a rock and not hit a place of worship in Thailand. Faith is not something that is missing in this culture. Just not the approved faith, I guess. Beach blanket bingo. Oh! This is the very first story I ever wrote in Thailand. I was hired by Phuket Magazine by a man named Patrick Cusick to write movie reviews of the movies. They had just opened an English language cinema in Phuket town. This was 89. They had just opened an English language cinema. They were showing movies in English, and they had a beautiful little viewing room separated from the main room where the soundtrack was in Thai. They had the English language soundtrack playing simultaneously in this little room with about 6 seats, but there were big, plush, beautiful seats with ashtrays in the armrests, beautiful air conditioning. So this is a big deal for the expat community on Phuket. Nobody had cable, nobody had satellite. Satellite dishes were fairly rare. So they said, we want you to review the movies that are coming to town. So I did that. I did 2 reviews before we discovered that, of course, it takes months to lay out a magazine, and the movies were long gone from the cinema by the time my review would appear. So Patrick introduced me to a type of journalism called letter home journalism. You write a letter to your mom. Dear Mom, today I did this and this and this and this. Love, Steve. Then you take off the Dear Mom, the Love, Steve, and you publish that first person, hopefully humorous anecdote as the sting, the last thing in a magazine, because a lot of people read magazines back to front. Not a lot of people are reading magazines at the moment, but the ones that do, a lot of them will start a magazine at the back page and read backwards. I don't know why. But, so you put something funny, a 1,000-word first-person anecdotal humor column at the end of the magazine. This was the first one that I wrote. This was the first time I wrote about Steve's life in Thailand. And I notice it begins with the first person personal pronoun, I. Always been my favorite word in the English language, I. Beach blanket bingo. And this is, I think, I don't remember how it ends. Yes, this is all absolutely true. This is before I started struggling to find endings for stories. Every word of this is true. I went surfing with my friend Paul yesterday. Paul Robertson. He is unfortunately gone now. He has died. But he was a very, very early expat on Phuket. When Paul and I go surfing, each of us does what he does best. Paul surfs and I sit on the beach and smoke. Paul is wiry and strong and tan like old leather. He's missing a finger. And he has the scar of a bullet wound on his shoulder that he won't ever talk about. He lives on 3 acres in Nai Han with Ot, his Thai wife, in a house that's half Farang construction and half Thai. He likes the teak and the bamboo. She likes the brick and tin. Go figure. Paul's been on Phuket for about 11 or 12 years now. Ot met him when she was in her early teens, and he was living in a ratty shack behind her uncle's restaurant on a piece of the hill where the Phuket Yacht Club is now. It's called the Nai Han now. She decided at that impressionable age that Paul was attractive, God knows why, and she set her cap for him. 6 years ago, they were married. We get decent surf only during the rainy season. So the rest of the year, Paul works on additions to his home or clearing his land, or else he just sits on the porch with Ot and their daughter Pammy watching the rice grow. But for 3 months every year, you don't see Paul, except from the shore, as he weaves and races and spins on his board, all glistening brown skin and flashing white teeth. Yesterday, after 2 hours of strenuous exercise in cold water, Paul came bounding up the beach full of energy with the board slung under one arm. He's shorter than me and about 20 pounds lighter, but I once strained a muscle just taking that board out of the Jeep for him. He tosses it around like a toothpick. Even before you hear Paul speak, you know he's Australian from his grin. He grins with his whole body. If he had a tail, he'd wag it like a puppy. I asked him how the surfing was, and he said, "It ain't ours, but it's wet." As he sat down next to me, I opened my second pack of Marlboros that day and offered Paul one of the 3 or 4 cigarettes that he'll smoke in a week. We talked a little gossip and mourned the local fishermen who went down with their boats in the first big storm of the season. And then Paul went off in his Jeep to do some shopping for Ot, and I headed home on my motorcycle. As I drove out of Nai Han Bay and started up the first of the big hills on the way to Kata, I was thinking about Paul and his life here, how he was the perfect expat, completely assimilated into a new culture without losing any of the comforting details of life back in the world. He eats bacon and eggs for breakfast and curried prawns for dinner. He knows the names of every rice farmer for miles around his house, and their wives and their kids and their dogs too. G'day, mate, and fair dinkum have become part of the patois of Nihon Thai. I thought about all this as I carefully wound my bike up the long hills and compared my own success as an expat to Paul's. Now, this is first draft. I wrote all of this in one go. I haven't changed it in in 30 years. I had not yet done a visa run when I wrote this story, so I had not yet been on Phuket 3 months. But I understood immediately and intuitively that people didn't want to hear the opinions and the stories of a guy who'd only been there less than 3 months. So early on in this column, I adopted a tone of voice that implied, without ever saying how long I'd been there, that implied that this Steve Rosse character was an old Asia hand, that he was a long time and knowledgeable expat on Phuket, and not a guy who had been riding the D train in New York City just two and a half months before this was written. I was comparing my own success as an expat to Paul's. Despite the time I've lived in the tropics, it's implied, it's always implied. I never came out and actually lied and said, I've been here for years and years and years. Despite the time I've lived in the tropics, my skin is still the same pale white it was when I lived in New York. Of course it was. Not only can't I surf, I don't ever go within 30 feet of the water. Still true, hate the water. I never drove at home. My entire adult life, I traveled by taxi or subway, true. And I've spent more money on repairing damages to my motorcycle after accidents here than I did to buy the damn thing. I am ambivalent toward Thai food. I don't dance. I drink only moderately. Yeah, I don't drink at all. And I am faithful to my partner. Ha! More lies. All of which relegates me to neutral observer status in Phuket's famous nightlife. I'm as about and unlikely a candidate for expat status as you could imagine. And a day watching Paul frolic in the surf brought that fact painfully to my mind as I crested the top of the hill over Katanoi and made the long, slow swing around to begin the descent into Kata. At the scenic viewpoint, I slowed down to look out over the 3 bays, and as I passed, a fat old Thai lady selling sodas from a card table under an umbrella called out, "Satep!" Once. This part is true. Once, about 18 months ago, I stopped and bought a Fanta from that old Yenta and sat under her umbrella to drink it. We made pleasant conversation that day. I introduced myself, and like almost everyone else in this kingdom, she heard my name as Satip Rot. I haven't stopped there since, but with my skinny legs and my battered old motorcycle, I'm easy to recognize on the road, and every time I pass, she hails me. Yesterday, I was elated by that woman's bastardization of my name. With that one word, I imagined, she endowed on me the expat status that I so envied Paul for, ending a sentence with a preposition. Despite the Thai preoccupation with status and correct appearances, they are, generally, the most accepting people I've ever encountered. And I knew that given time, I would be as at home here as Paul. Maybe even to the point that the Thais in my neighborhood will start sprinkling their speech with, "What's happening, babe?" I swooped down on Kata Beach grinning into the wind. Not quite as well as Paul grins, but a healthy smile nonetheless. It's not the beaches or the food that are the real attraction of this island for foreigners. And this time of year, it's certainly not the weather. It's the simple fact of common human hospitality. The people of Phuket have only one industry, the hospitality industry. They make no cars or shoes or toys or planes. All they make is people happy. Come, be at ease, they say. Make a place for yourself for a day, a week, a month, or for years. A place for yourself, made by your own design, far from where you were originally placed on the earth. If you have that, you're an expat. Heck, anyone can do that on Phuket, whether they can surf or not. Even I can do it. Well, I did. I did for 7 years. I made a place for myself on Phuket for 7 years, and then it all went to shit. But now I am here in this space that I have made for myself. I am here for 4 years, well, 3 years, 3.5 years. And I feel like it is mine. I feel like I have made a place by my own design. First thing I ever wrote in Thailand. A place for yourself made by your own design, far from where you were originally placed on the earth. If you have that, you're an expat. That's all right. I'm kind of proud of that. First thing, the first thing I ever wrote for a magazine or a newspaper. Chariots of Fire. Oh, I like this one. I would like to update this at some point. I would like to rewrite this. Chariots of Fire. I was sitting, can you hear that whistle? Bob, the turtle, when he comes up to breathe, his sinuses go whee, 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 and then he'll go back down. You always know when he's surfacing because you hear that whee, whee of his nostrils. I was sitting at my front window yesterday watching the rain and smoking when Moo drove by on his way to school. In his cheap yellow poncho, he was as round as a lemon. Fat Thai kids are rare. Yeah, they were. They're not now. Fat Thai kids everywhere. Fat adults. Fat kids. And they're almost always named Moo, which means pig. At 10 years of age and 4 feet tall, Moo already weighs about 150 pounds. Back home, Back home, a kid that fat would wear a permanent haunted expression, the look of the permanently teased. But I've never seen Moo look anything except blissfully happy. Part of it is due to the traditional Thai tolerance and generosity in most things, at least, other than the giving of nicknames. Part of it is surely due to the fact that even though he's only in the 4th grade, his hands are already twice the size of the biggest 6th graders. Moo has looked especially happy since he received his new Schwinn bicycle. Being built like an ox helps keep the other kids from picking on you, but it also slows you down. It's tough for Moo to keep up with our local whelps, but on his new bike, pumping away with legs as thick as telephone poles, he's now always first to the swimming hole, first to the football field, first home from school to watch Ikkyu-san, the Japanese cartoon about the prepubescent karate master. With all that power at his disposal, Moo can easily ride 2 or 3 kids on his handlebars and rear mudguard. He'll never be lonely. Ikkyu-san, Ikkyu-san, Ikki, 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 Ikkyu-san. Andy, like at 2 years of age, just adored that cartoon. You know, I don't see it around. There's anime everywhere now. There's never been, I suppose, a resurgence of fandom for Ikkyu-san. I wonder why. Seeing Moo rumble past my window reminded me that my own bike, my beloved Yamaha RXZ, was in the garage and would remain there until I could pay to bail it out. Payday was still a week away, and without my bike, I had no way to get to work. I had already borrowed Pijarun's Jeep more times than I could count, and Pipeo's pickup truck, and Nongloop's Honda Dream 100, and even Kun An's ancient Vespa, a 50cc moped with no lights, no brakes, and no horn, and an old lard can held on with bungee cords for a gas tank. Rolling up to the office on that machine lost me years of face, and Kun An wouldn't lend it to me anymore anyway, since my dog killed one of his chickens. I had no idea how I'd get to work, but unless I did, I'd never be able to get my motorcycle out of hock. I would have asked Moo if I could borrow his Schwinn, but I knew he'd never part with it. Phuket is an island the size of Manhattan or Singapore, with only the most rudimentary public transportation, and now even less. The Route Phong Teo are gone, and now there's less public transportation on Phuket. Thank you, taxi mafia. Everything here is spread out. There's always a beach or a mountain or a floodplain between you and where you have to be. Add to this the current provincial government's determination to improve the roads from the airport to the various hotels, since every moment a tourist spends in a minivan is a moment he's not spending money. And you can see why what a man drives on Phuket is more important than the watch he wears, or the cell phone he speaks into, or where he plays golf. My Yamaha has been my most trusted friend and companion, beside my wife, lie, and my most valued possession for the past several years. I bought it with an expired American Express card, and I've treated it better than any cowboy ever treated his horse. I feed it only super gasoline from real gas stations, nothing hand-cranked from a dirty barrel in front of a noodle shop. It's what the Thais will call a support bike, or what the motorcycle industry calls a cafe racer, built to look like a racing bike, but with just 133 cc's of two-stroke engine, it's only enough of a machine to carry you to the local cafe and back. Nobody on the island rents RXZs to tourists, so I'm less likely to be taken for one, which saves me hours that I would otherwise have to spend explaining that no, I don't want to visit the elephant farm, take a boat trip, buy drugs, or go home with anybody. In the culture I come from, clothes are said to make the man. On Phuket, cars make the man. If you've been here long enough, you can read a man like a book if you can see his ride. Say you're cruising on your motorcycle down Chao Pha Road, stuck behind a bus full of Muslim schoolgirls. You pull out to pass, and you're faced with an oncoming 10-wheel construction truck full of gravel. You pull back in behind the bus, and as the truck grazes your right elbow, you get a chance to examine the long line of vehicles trailing it just the way you're trailing the bus. First come a couple of pale young men on MTX dirt bikes slathered in bar stickers. Each has a bored bar girl on the pillion seat. Obvious tourists by their impatience to pass the truck, and by the fact that nobody but a tourist would risk life and limb on a bike or a girl that's been rented and abused by hundreds of reckless guys before them. Behind the tourists is a cream-colored Benz, and you instinctively throttle back. It's probably a local, spending the money his grandpa made on rubber or tin, but it may be a patong cop. Either way, you don't want to risk a bit of gravel flying up off your rear wheel to dent his paint or chip his windshield. Yeah. You know, a patong cop, you back then you had to pay $1 million baht to be given a job with the patong police, because the money you made in graft and corruption as a patong cop was so much that you had to buy your way into that position. So you had to be wealthy. You had to be a wealthy cop before you applied for the job. It reminds me of Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, Schwarzenegger, when he was about 22, was already a multimillionaire from selling supplements out of magazine ads, you know, weightlifting, bodybuilding magazine ads. And he would sell vitamins and supplements and stuff, sell his image to companies that did these things. So before they ever made Pumping Iron, his first film appearance, he was already a multimillionaire. And a lot of people don't realize that. This is how you become governor of California. People underestimate you. I digress. We were talking about people in their automobiles on Phuket in 1989. Behind the patong cop comes 7 uniformed school kids packed onto a Honda Dream 100, the Mule of Asia. The driver appears to be about 12 years old, and he's the oldest kid on the bike. Behind them is an old man driving the same kind of bike, but his is 15 years older. He drives with one hand, and with the other, he steadies a pole hung with durian or mango, depending on the season. He's a local, probably never been off the island, and probably never made more than 180 baht per day in his whole life. Though he could just as easily have sold some land last year to the Japanese for 10 million baht. If that's the case, the guy in the cream-colored Benz may be his son. Swinging around him, giving the fresh fruit a wide berth as they pass, are 2 young men in knee socks and shorts, riding a Yamaha Bel R, which is just a Dream 100 with sexier lines and better TV ads. These are hotel waiters on their way to yet another football game. In the middle of the convoy, this got me in trouble. In the middle of the convoy is a battered green Peugeot coupe, and despite the weathered paint and the cracked window, the motor purrs like a kitten. I look like Tintin this morning. Driving, watch it, Steve, is a middle-aged Westerner, and seated next to him is a younger but no longer young Thai woman. In the back are a few toffee-colored kids. This is a long-term expat, one who came a few years ago and has been cautious and thus successful ever since. He's got a good woman, well-behaved kids who attend the international school, a few rai of land, and a house in Rawai. But often, lately, he gets homesick. Remind me after I finish this to explain how that paragraph got me in trouble. 2 Suzuki Crystals, plastic and aluminum bikes in day-glow colors, slow and awkward and dangerous, but the cheapest motor-driven vehicle you can buy, follow the Peugeot. The bikes are poking along in tandem, and each is ridden by 3 girls. The girls are having an animated conversation with lots of hand waving and brushing back of long hair. Their hands seem pretty big for girls' hands, and the veins stand out on their hairy forearms. 6 transvestites on their way to the cabaret, talking about makeup and Madonna and the new number in the act. Behind them is a tiny Nissan pickup truck, packed to the gunwales with about 30 day laborers. Some of them are shouting crude comments into the wind, which the transvestites ignore. The ones not shouting are either Lao or Burmese, habitually quiet and unobtrusive because they're here without passports, visas, or work permits. Following the illegals is a shiny red Jeep with smoked windows. It's a rental, but a classy one. No promotional stickers or gaudy decals. Rented from one of the reputable firms or maybe from one of the better hotels, so probably driven by a very high-class tourist. Maybe a rock star resting up after a long tour, or European minor royalty hiding from the paparazzi, or Saddam Hussein's kidney specialist. Whoever it is, they're driving very slowly and carefully. Maybe they're used to driving on the right-hand side of the road. Yeah, I met a guy in a bar, and he told me he was a kidney doctor, and that he was coming back from treating Saddam Hussein, that he was flown from America to Iraq. Saddam Hussein had type 2 diabetes or something, and needed treatment, and this guy was a kidney specialist. He was Saddam Hussein. That's what he said. A guy in the bar said it, so, must be true. Bringing up the rear of the procession is a rugged-looking bike with a big headlight, driven by a man in a crash helmet and a red vest. His vest is faded almost to pink by the sun, and his helmet shows evidence of having met the pavement more than once. The Honda Wing is the preferred ride of the motorcycle taxi driver because it's inexpensive, rugged, and easy to fix yourself. Riding on the back of this one, side saddle with her shapely legs crossed at the ankles, is a beautiful girl in an evening dress. She's a sing-a-song girl on her way to work, her bag stuffed with sheet music, cosmetics, and maybe a few condoms. Balanced precariously on the pillion seat, she carries her high heels in one hand and holds down her long hair with the other. When the parade's gone by, you throttle up and you pass the bus, and the schoolgirls all stare at you from under their identical scarves like a rank of prepubescent nuns. The driver gives you a friendly toot on his horn, and you wave back, and there you are with miles of empty road in front of you. A full tank of gas, and just enough time to get to where you're going. You wind it up and you fly, because you know the road, you know your bike, and the day is fine. You lean into the wind, lean into the curves, find the motor sweet spot, and let the bike drive itself. All you can hear is the wind, and all you can feel is the thrum of your bike. But you don't get too complacent, because you've seen the bodies lying in the middle of the road, covered by newspapers, and you've seen the twisted wreckage of bikes jammed up under the wheels of minivans. I missed all of this as I sat at my window yesterday, watching the yellow beach ball that was Moo rolling down the track towards our village school. If he were Japanese, he'd be in a special sumo wrestling school, eating starchy foods and learning how to protect his gonads. I took a shower and picked out a shirt that didn't smell too strongly of mildew, resigned to taking a bus over the mountain to work. As I packed my briefcase, my friend Marty rolled up in his Holden Premier. The Holden is an Australian car. This one, a four-door white coupe that was imported by a military advisor to Bangkok in the 70s. Marty is staff photographer at a Bangkok-based travel magazine. And he gets the use of the Holden whenever he's in Phuket. He wanted to tell someone about the two Indian stewardesses for Cathay Pacific that he stayed with on his recent trip to Hong Kong. Or maybe they were Korean. Anyway, Marty needed an audience and I needed a ride. And this symbiotic relationship meant that I was to ride to work in both style and an atmosphere of Marlboro smoke and male bonding. Like many Aussies, Marty suffers from mate worship, and no sexual exploit is really complete until he's bragged to someone about it. The girls at work took special notice of the Holden as we drove up. I think they have a daily pool on what kind of rig I'll arrive in. Marty drove off to the clinic for another blood test, and I went to my desk. There is in a lower drawer of that desk a small book I found a long time ago on touring Thailand by motorcycle. On mornings when I feel nostalgic, I'll sneak it out and look through it. But I don't let the boss see me doing that, because living on Phuket is a long, strange trip, and nobody rides for free. You may have noticed that was a longer story than usual. That was probably about 3,000 words. It was written for Phuket Magazine. We know that because it's longer. The columns for The Nation were exactly 1,000 words every week. Phuket Magazine, I could go as long as I wanted, and they preferred longer. So this is a long one. Now, the publisher of Phuket Magazine was a guy named John Everingham. And in the paragraph where I talk about a man who's getting homesick, he's got a battered green Peugeot coupe, he's got a good woman, he's got kids in the international school, but often lately he gets homesick. That I have boulderized that for publication in this book. The original story was a description of a Falang man that included a description of his car, the safari suit that he habitually wore, and the fact that he had a mia noi, he had a minor wife. The publisher of Phuket Magazine was a man named John Everingham, who I think lives now in Hua Hin, and his son Ananda is a very famous Thai actor. He's Luke Krung, he's biracial, of course. And Ananda Everingham, I think, still works as an actor in Bangkok. He's fairly well known. He was the publisher at that time. He was the owner of Art Asia Press. They printed postcards, several different magazines. They did, Pha Thai magazine for Bangkok Air, the in-flight magazine for Bangkok Air. He was a publishing mogul and my boss. And he recognized himself, he thought, in that paragraph of this story published in one of his magazines. And he wasn't the editor. He didn't see the stuff before it was published. He was the publisher. So he got very angry at me. And he was angry at me without my knowing it for like 20, 25 years. And when these books were published, I reached out to him. I found him online and sent him an email and said, he was a photographer. He was very famous. They actually made a movie about John Everingham's life. Starred Michael Douglas of Bonanza fame as John Everingham, the famous war correspondent. And I said, have you got a photo I can use for the cover of a book? And he was still angry. He was still angry about this paragraph. He did supply me with a photo to his credit. I have no idea. And I cannot remember writing this. I cannot tell you if it was based on him, but likely it was. The original paragraph, when I went back and looked at it 30 years later in preparing this manuscript, I said, well, golly, yeah, I can see where he would have seen himself in that. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't trying to diss the guy. He was paying my bills. He was, buying my words. I would not have tried to piss him off, but he did. And he carried that anger without bringing it up, without ever telling me. This is a very powerful and important man who disliked Steve Rosse intensely. I had no idea. No idea. All right. I'm going to hang it up, Maddie. Take it easy. Have a great day. And I'll see you in a couple days. Let's get together and do this again. What do you say? Bye.